Shalom. So, um, there is a Jewish custom that when someone passes away, we study the Mishnah in order so that their soul, so the word soul is neshama, and it's the same Hebrew letters as Mishnah. So that their soul should be elevated by this. And people try to finish the study of the Mishnah within 30 days or within a year. So Rabbi Dovid Schochet, who was one of the leading rabbis in Chabad, and he's the elder brother of Rabbi Ezra Shalchat, who is the Rosh Yeshiva Or El-Hanan here in Los Angeles, Or El-Hanan Chabad here in Los Angeles, and Rabbi Emmanuel Shalchat, who there are many YouTube videos. Rav Dovid was of Beit Din, I believe. He was one of the leading rabbis of Toronto in Canada. And his entire family, including his nephew, who's my rabbi here at Chabad at USC, very, very prominent rabbis. The family is not just Chabad. There are many members of the family who are prominent in Orthodox Jewish life, but especially in Chabad, the family is very prominent and beloved people who do a lot of good work in the world. And so Rav Dovid passed away. He on Sunday night. So it's been a few days already. And I only found out about it today. And so there was a website where they have done a chalukah of the entire Mishnah to be finished within 30 days of his passing. Chalukah is, so different people take different parts of the Mishnah and all of them study them so that his neshama should have an aliyah. And I saw that this online charts, there were a lot of places still not taken. About, what does it say? 51% is taken so far. So I took a very short Masechta, Avodah Zarah. I thought it was fitting and it was available. So I took Avodah Zarah and I thought I could stream it in his merit. So the description has the actual Mishnah and an article which basically an obituary for Rav Dovid ben Rav Yehuda. His neshama should have an aliyah. So to explain what the Mishnah is, the Mishnah was composed around the year 200 by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, usually translated as Judah the Prince, as a mnemonic poem that people would memorize actually the entirety of, and many much more accomplished Jews than I do still memorize the entirety of the Mishnah. A lot of people, including my rabbi, for example, learn the entirety of the Mishnah before their bar mitzvah. There's a custom in some families to make a siyum, complete the entirety of the Mishnah for the 13th birthday. I obviously never did that. I've never been through the entire Mishnah, although I've been through a lot of it. And so the Mishnah is meant to remind you of the entirety of the oral law. Rabbi Yehuda saw that people were forgetting the oral law, and so he composed this poem as something people could memorize, and by reciting it, remember the oral law. It is a collection of teachings from various rabbis, and the Talmuds. There are two Talmuds. There's the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. They are discussions and commentary on the various tractates of the Mishnah. The Mishnah has 6 orders and 60 tractates, although if you actually count the tractates, there's more of them. But traditionally, there are 60 tractates of the Mishnah, not 10 per order. But around 10 per order. And in the order of Nezikin, which is torts or damages, is the tractate Avodah Zarah, which translates literally to a foreign worship, which means idolatry. So this is the tractate on idolatry, and it has 5 chapters, and hopefully we'll be able to get through a chapter in not so long. I'm going to try to get through it in, and I'm not sure if I'm going to stream the entirety of me trying to get through it. Obviously, I mean, some people just recite it, but I don't think that's what I'm going to do. I am going to actually try to learn it. I considered doing it with the Bartanura, which is the traditional commentary, and there's an English translation here on Safaria. Another very popular commentary, more modern commentary, is the Kahati. Rabbi Kahati went through and created a commentary which incorporates the commentaries of the Talmud, so that you can understand the Mishnah in light of the Talmud, and that's a very popular set of Mishnayot to have. But I might just do it with the Steinsaltz translation here in English. And if there's questions about understanding it, I mean, I definitely want to understand what the Mishnah is actually saying, and the Mishnah can be cryptic at times. So, not sure I'm going to do all the Bartanuras. I considered also doing Maimonides. we'll see how long it takes and how much time I have. I do want to finish this by his Shloshim, which is going to be Thursday, February 29th. But okay, so here we go. Mishnah 1, chapter 1. Lifnei eidehem shel goyim shlosha yamim asur laset velatet imahem. Lahash'ilan velish'ol mehen, lahalvotan velilvot mehen, lefar'an ulepara mehen. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, nifra'in mehen mipnei shehu metzer lo, amru lo af al pi shemetzer hu achshav, sameach hu lachar zman. So, it is talking about holidays of idolaters. The word is goyim. Unfortunately, the entire tractate of the Zarah was censored for a long time. And whether the original Mishnah said akum, goyim, right? Most of the things that were censored in Europe have been reconstructed from the writings that were available in Muslim lands, including Yemen. But there's always the problem of whether the proper girsa, the proper language should be referring to goyim, which would be all Gentiles, or akum, which is ovdei kochavim umazalot, people who worship the stars and constellations, or planets, or any other of the terms that are sometimes used. These are reconstructed Mishnayot, unfortunately. Anyway, so, and this is one of the important things about, one of the things I point out to people who want to simply dismiss all Christianity as idolatry. Well, if that were true, then it would be prohibited to do any sort of business 3 days before and 3 days after any holidays. Now, let's say you were not including Sunday in that, because if you did, you can just pretty much forget having any business whatsoever with Christians. It would certainly include Christmas and Easter. And so this is not something that is brought lahalacha or done. I mean, I don't know anyone who claims that this applies to Christmas or, let's say, Easter. But on the 3 days before the festivals of Gentiles, the following actions are prohibited, as they would bring joy to the Gentile who would subsequently give thanks to his object of idol worship on his festival. So it is prohibited for a Jew to cause a Gentile to sin. And since idolatry is a sin for a Gentile, a Jew that was contributing to a sinful act of a Gentile is also sinning. So in halachic terms, Lifnei iver lo titen mikshol, do not place a stumbling block before the blind, applies to Gentiles just as it does to Jews. So this is a gezerah, it is an edict of the rabbis that 3 days before the holidays, I thought it was 3 days before and after, but this Mishnah so far is saying 3 days before. You cannot do any of the following things. It is prohibited to engage in business with them. So the bold is the actual wording of the Mishnah. And like I said, the Mishnah is a mnemonic poem. And so there's a lot of words missing. And this is the Koren Steinsaltz Mishnah. And so this is how Rabbi Steinsaltz explains this Mishnah. Various commentaries at various places have different interpretations, but we won't go that far. Okay. It is prohibited to engage in business with them, to lend items to them or to borrow items from them, to lend money to them or to borrow money from them, and to repay debts owed to them or to collect payments of debts from them. Rabbi Yehuda says one may collect repayment of debts from them because this causes the Gentile distress. The rabbi said to Rabbi Yehuda, even though he is distressed now, when he repays the money, he is happy afterward that he is relieved of the debt, and therefore there is concern that he will give thanks to his object of idol worship on his festival. Okay. Rabbi Ishmael Omer, second Mishnah. Rabbi Ishmael Omer, Shlosha yamim lifnehem u'shlosha yamim la'acharehem asur. V'chachamim omrim lifnei eidehem asur, la'achar eidehem mutar. So, this is where I was thinking of. Rabbi Ishmael says that all of these things are prohibited 3 days before and 3 days after. The sages say that before 3 days before it's prohibited, but 3 days after it's allowed. And let's read the Bartanura. And la'achar eidehem mutar, it is allowed according to the majority of the rabbis. And such is the halacha. So the Bartanura is saying that the halacha is that we are able to. But in the diaspora, where we are unable to contain ourselves from engaging in business with them, since the principal part of our sustenance is from them, and furthermore, because of fear, is not prohibited to do business with them other than only on the day of their holidays alone. But nowadays, there is the general practice of permission to engage in business interactions with them, even on the actual day of their festivals, because the rabbis established regarding them that they do not go and praise their deities, but those things that are forbidden in this tractate speaks about idolatrous worship and actual idolatry. So like I was saying, we don't really do this anymore. Let's stay on the Bartanur. Okay. Ve'elu el eidehem shel goyim. And these are the holidays of the Gentiles. Kalenda ustarnura ukratesim v'yom genusya shel malachim v'yom haleda v'yom hamita divrei Rabbi Meir. So we'll read the translations of these things. A lot of them appear to be in Greek, or maybe even Latin. V'chachamim omrim kol mita sheyesh ba srefa yesh ba avodah zarah u'she'ein ba srefa ein ba avodah zarah yom tiglachat zekano u'blorito yom she'ala bo min hayam v'yom she'yatza bo mibeit ha'asurim וגוי שעשה משתה לבנו אינו אסור אלא אותה היום ואותה האיש בלבד. And these are the festivals of the Gentiles: Calenda, Saturnalia, and Cratisis, and the days of the festivals of their kings, and the birthday of the king, and the anniversary of the day of the death of the king. So let's see what Calenda, according to the Bartanura, 8 days after the winter solstice. Saturnura is Nalia, 8 days prior to the solstice. Since the first man, Adam, saw that the length of the day was gradually getting shorter, he said, "Woe is me, lest because I sinned, the world is returning to become null and void." He stood and sat for 8 days in fasting and in prayer, since from the time that the solstice occurred, and he, i.e. Adam, saw that the days are gradually lengthening, he said, "It is the nature of the world." He stood and made an 8-day festival. In the following year, they made both of them holy days and established them in honor of the heavens, and they were established for idolatrous worship. Kartisim, the day of taking hold of the kingship. Okay? And they established it as a holiday. Genusia, the day when they appoint the king. Okay? When he's born. Okay? This is the statement of Rabbi Meir, and the rabbis say every death that includes public burning is a festival that includes idol worship. So Bartanur says, where they burn the utensils in the manner that they burn them for kings. I don't really know about these types of burnings, but there you go. That is to say, that self-same day, they have an idolatrous holiday. And from year to year, all the days of his son, and all these we consider until now, they value, and it is forbidden for us to interact with them 3 days before their festivals. But in the case of the day of his shaving his beard and his locks, apparently this was considered, which is not a set time for the group, but each person, when he shaves, makes that day a festival. Apparently that was something people, and blurit, which is a type of lock that Gentiles would grow during the time of the Mishnah, that he places his locks behind him all year long, but does not shear them other than on an annual basis. The day of his shearing, he makes a holiday. Okay? And the day of his ascent from the sea, and the day that he left prison, and also in the case of a Gentile who prepared a wedding feast for his son and celebrates on that day, engaging in business is prohibited only on that day and with that particular man. So these were idolatrous festivals that people would have that were personal to them, and so it only applied to that particular person. Ir sheyesh ba avodah zarah chutza la mutar haya chutza la avodah zarah tocha mutar mahu lelech lasham bizman שהדרך המיוחדת לאותו מקום אסור, ואם היה יכול להלך בה למקום אחר מותר. עיר שיש בה עבודה זרה והיו בה חנויות מאותרות ושאינן מאותרות, זה היה מעשה בבית שאן, ואמרו חכמים המאותרות אסורות ושאינן מאותרות מותרות. Okay. So what happens when you have these festivals? And so what would generally happen is that there would be festivals, and people would go to the festivals to trade. And to this day, there are Christmas markets all over Europe. right? In the case of a city in which there is active idol worship, it is permitted to engage in business transactions with Gentiles who live outside of the city. If the idol worship is outside the city, it is permitted to engage in business within the city. What is the halacha with regard to traveling there? A place where a pagan festival is being celebrated. When the road is designated only for that place, it is prohibited to use the road. And as onlookers who assume that the traveler intends to join the festival, right? And it is prohibited to give the impression that you are going to go be involved in idolatry. But if one were able to travel on it to arrive at another place, it is permitted to use the road to reach the place that is observing the festival. And all of these things become particularly problematic when you are dealing with people in India, for example, where there's actual idolatry happening a lot. With regard to a city in which idol worship is practiced and in which there are stores that are adorned, me'utarot literally means crowned, for the sake of idol worship, and there are others that are not adorned. This was, in fact, an incident that occurred in Beit Sha'an. I believe Beit Sha'an is in Israel. What does he say about Beit Sha'an? He doesn't say anything about Beit Sha'an. Let me see if I can find. Nobody says where Beit Sha'an is. Let me see if that which one it says. Beit Sha'an. I don't know where Beit Sha'an is, and I can't seem to find it either. So, okay. Here, let me check Beit Sha'an. It is a town in Israel. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a major town in Israel during the Roman times. So, this was in Israel itself. And the sages said, with regard to the adorned shops, it is prohibited to buy from them, but in the case of those that are not adorned, it is permitted. Okay. Elu devarim asurim limkor legoyim itztrolaben uvnot shuach petotrotehen ulvona vetarnagol halavan. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mutar limkar lo tarnagol lavan bein hatarnagolim, ובזמן שהוא בפני עצמו קוטע את אצבעו ומוכרו לו, לפי שאין מקריבין חסר לעבודה זרה. ושאר כל הדברים סתמן מותר ופירושן אסור. רבי מאיר אומר, אף דקל תו וחצב ונקלבם asur limkor legoyim. So particular things were not allowed to be sold. These are the items that it is prohibited to sell to a Gentile at any time of the year, as they are used specifically for idol worship. It's trulabin. It sounds like an astrolabe, but I'm not. I mean, Wow, fruit of the cedar. Okay, I guess. Benot shuach. Yeah, this was a white fig, I believe is how. I think there's a discussion um, in the Gemara about this, but it is prohibited for an Israelite to sell a kind of the species of the large white figs. Apparently, they were used specifically petotarot with their stems. It is stated, meaning to say with their stalks, peduncles, by which they are suspended for undefined. The idolater want to offer them as a sacrificial petutraot. What are petutraot? Let's see if I can get. Trying to see if I can get. Let me see if this says. Apparently, the Talmud has discussions about what these exactly are. So apparently Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says that those things, if they are sold with their stems, apparently particularly fruit with their stems were used in idolatry. Frankincense and a white rooster. Rabbi Yehuda says it is permitted to sell a white rooster to a Gentile provided that it is sold along with other types of roosters. But when it is sold by itself, one should cut off its toe and sell it to the Gentile because they do not sacrifice a defective animal to their object of idol worship. And as far as cutting off something like a toe, I mean, whether that's unnecessary tsar balei chayim, generally it's not considered a horrible thing as long as the animal is not cutting. I mean, people who have worked on farms know that various types of cutting things like ears or tails or cropping, right? Extremities of animals is a normal part of just agriculture that gets done a lot. And if you watch any of the videos of people who farm today, you will see similarly that they do stuff like that without the animal actually being distressed more than generally you end up with distressed animals when you're taking care of farm animals. Okay. Because they do not sacrifice a defective animal to their object of idol worship. And with regard to all remaining items, without specification, it is permitted to sell them, but with specification, it is prohibited to sell them. Let's see what they mean by if he explains specified that it was for idolatry that he needed them, it is prohibited. And it was necessary for Mishnah to specify this, for you might think that I would say that this person wanted them not for idolatrous purposes. And when he said this, he holds that just as that this person clings to it for idolatrous purposes, everyone else also clings to it. And I would say this for just as he would give it to me, it to teach us. Where is this translation coming from? Pirushan Asur, Impirash Avodah Zarah by Lahu Asur. Ve'itzrich Lamatni, the Salka Daita Chamina, Hai Gavra Lo La the Zarah Boy Lahu, Vahai the Kamar Hachi, Savar Kihechi the Hahu Gavra Avik Ba, Kula Alma Nami Aviku, Ve'ime Hachi Kihechi the Litvu Li Kamashmala. If I understand that Aramaic well, which I'm not a great person at Aramaic, but it's better than the English. He's saying that it needs to tell us that both these statements, because I might think that if anyone said, then for everyone it would be prohibited. But no, it happened. We generally assume that people are, for any other thing, it's not for idolatrous purposes. Rabbi Meir says, even in the case of a good palm tree, chatzav and naklav, it is prohibited to sell it to the Gentiles. Let me see if he says Chatzav Kinyan Shosin Mehem Hatsukra. Sugar canes. Let me see what the English says. Reeds that they make from them sugar. Hey, I was right. The naklavin, a kind of very superior herb and grass, and the halacha is according to Rabbi Meir, it is prohibited to sell to them to Gentiles. Okay. Makom shenahagu limkor behema daka legoyim mochrin, makom shenahagu shelo limkor ein mochrin. V'chol makom ein mochrin lahem behema gasa, agalim v'usayachin shlemim ushvurim. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shvura, uvein betera matir b'sus. So there are small domesticated animals like sheep and goats, and then there are large ones which are like cows, right? And different types of cows, really. Okay. In a place where residents were accustomed to sell small domesticated animals to Gentiles, one may sell them. In a place where they were not accustomed to sell them, one may not sell them. So you have to go according to the custom of the Jewish community there. But in every place, one may not sell large livestock, calves, and foals, whether these animals are whole or damaged. The sages prohibited these sales lest a Jew's animal perform labor for the Gentile on Shabbat in violation of an explicit Torah prohibition, as explained in the Gemara. What is this prohibition that I don't understand? Rabbi Yehuda permits the sale of a damaged animal because it is incapable of performing labor, and Ben Betera permits the sale of a horse for riding because riding a horse on Shabbat is not prohibited by Torah law. Let me see what the Bartuner says. For we decree that selling is on account of renting and borrowing, for it is an animal of an Israelite, and the idolater will do work with it on the Sabbath and through a middleman. For they cannot exchange it through renting it, for the middleman does not lease it, but he is permitted to sell it. Okay, I don't like this translation. The Gazrin and Mechera atu schirot v'hash'ala shehi behemto shel Israel v'yaseh ba nachrim alacha b'Shabbat v'al yedei sirsur delekad lachlufe b'skirut she'ein hasisrur maskir share lemochra. So apparently there is a rabbinic injunction since selling was used as a way of basically renting, because you would sell the animal and then buy it back, and that was that it would be a way of getting around the rules of not renting your animals. This is a rabbinic prohibition on sales, and it's allowed through a middleman, because that way it's getting even further away from renting. Okay. Ein mochrin lahem dubin ve'arayot v'chol davar sheyeshu bo nezek l'rabim. Ein bonin imahem basilki gardom ve'itz tadya uvima. Aval bonim imahem bimosyaot ubeit merchatzaot higiu lakipa shama'amidin ba avodah zarah asur livnot. So now we're talking about, well, first let's start with the bears. One may not sell bears or lions or any item that can cause injury to the public to Gentiles. And the bartender says anything that can, like any weapons of war, such as a sword or a spear, right? So these are things which they can use to harm people, and so we cannot be involved in their harm of other people or other people or us, but in harm. One may not build them a basilica, a tribunal, a stadium, or a platform. So all of these things were used in by their governments. All of these were buildings that could end up being used to kill people. The basilica is, according to the Bartanura, was used as a court, and people would be put to death. Same by Gardom, which this gets translated as tribunal, and a stadium was used to, like the Colosseum, for human fighting. And the platforms were also used to put people to death. But one may build them small platforms, bimusirot, and bathhouses. So the bartender says, as long as it's not for killing someone or for idolatry, it is allowed. Even in this case, once he reaches the arched chamber in the bath, where the Gentiles put up objects of idol worship, it is prohibited to build it. These are Roman baths. Okay. Ve'ein osin tachshitein la'avodah zarah kutlaot unezamim v'tabaot. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Baschar Mutar Ein Mochrin Lahem B'Mechubar Lakarka Aval Mocher Hu Mishiyakatzetz. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mocher Hu Lo Almanat Lakotz Ve'ein Maskerin Lahem Batim Be'eretz Yisrael Ve'ein Tzarech Lomar Sadot Ubesurya Maskerin Lahem Batim Aval Lo Sadot ובחוץ לארץ מוכרים להם בתים ומזכירים שדות. דברי רבי מאיר, רבי יוסי אומר בארץ ישראל מזכירים להם בתים אבל לא שדות, ובסוריה מוכרים בתים ומזכירים שדות, ובחוץ לארץ מוכרים אלו ואלו. So we're talking about land transactions now, well after the jewelry. And one may not fashion jewelry for an object of idol worship, and this applies to jewelry such as necklaces, nose rings, and rings. Rabbi Eliezer says if one fashions them in exchange for payment, it is permitted. The Mishnah returns to the issue of selling items to Gentiles. One may not sell to a Gentile any item that is attached to the ground, but one may sell such an item once it is severed from the ground. So this is based on a verse which says that you cannot sell land in Israel to idolaters, and because of that, something that is attached to the ground, the rabbis don't allow as well. Rabbi Yehuda says it is not necessary to sever the item from the ground; rather, one may sell it on the condition that it be severed. One may not rent a house to a Gentile or Avodah Zarah, like I explained above, in Eretz Yisrael, and needless to say, one may not rent fields to them. So he says the reason why it is obvious but needless to say the fields is because there's also a problem of the tithes in addition to simply land, because in fields produce is grown. And in Syria, one may rent houses to Gentiles, but one may not rent fields. And outside of Eretz Yisrael, one may sell houses and rent fields to Gentiles. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosei says, in Eretz Yisrael, one may rent houses to Gentiles, but one may not rent fields. And in Syria, one may sell houses to them and rent fields. And outside of Eretz Yisrael, one may sell both these houses and those fields. The halacha ke Rabbi Yossi, and the bartender says that the halacha is according to Rabbi Yossi. Bilvad shelo yaskir be'eretz Yisrael l'shlosha nochrim beyachad shelo yaseh shchuna shel nochrim. So he only prohibits that there should be a placement of three, such as so that it creates an established like village. Af b'makom she'amru lahaskir lo lebeit dira amru mipnei shehu machnis letocho avodah zarah. Shne'emar v'lo tavi to'eva el beitecha. ובכל מקום לא יזכיר לו את המרחץ, מפני שהוא נקרא על שמו. Even in a place with regard to which the sages said that it is permitted for a Jew to rent a house to a Gentile, do not say that one may rent it for use as a residence, because the Gentile will bring objects of idol worship into it, as it is stated, you shall not bring an abomination into your house, Deuteronomy 7:26. And this is still considered the house of a Jew. And for the same reason, in every place one may not rent a bathhouse to a Gentile, since it is called by the name of the owner, and onlookers will think the Jew is operating it on the Sabbath. Okay, so that's chapter 1. It took me about an hour. And hopefully, so 4 more hours and I should be able to finish the entire thing. Seems good. Okay, Rabbi Dovid ben Dov Yehuda, Zechron al-Racha, his soul should have an aliyah.